So let's go to
State of the state.
the state of the state.
State of the state.
The economy was a powder keg ready to blow the past year, and coronavirus is what blew it up.
And everything blows up in your face.
Now, there's deep uncertainty about what will happen to the economy. If the market crashed on its own terms, it may yield different impacts. But there are specific impacts rooted in COVID-19 that will shape the economy moving forward. Many economies, which have, more robust social programs, have more resilience and will be able to bounce back to how they used to be easier. Plenty of other countries are politically and economically elastic. The U.S. political economic system is stretched so thin that I personally think it's a lot more likely to snap than other similar economies. Now, as a leftist, I think the left should seize the opportunity to speculate about what a post-COVID economy will look like while the capitalist class is scrambling with short-sighted hubris, trying to figure out how to make money right now. We need money now.
I have a structured settlement and I need cash now.
Call J.G. Wentworth, 877 cash now.
Elon Musk's this statement, where he's minimized the coronavirus and poo-pooed it like it's nothing, is a great example. He's not focused on the economy 5 years from now. He needs cash now.
I need cash now.
The economy will change because of coronavirus. I mean, it already has, and it will remain changed in some way or another. And if we anticipate those changes, we can better organize for them. So here's my speculation about how the economy could change. One part of the economy that could remain impacted is retail work. I think a lot of retailers may realize that online sales are more profitable than having a storefront. Big and ubiquitous companies would still have retail spaces, but some have to be making the calculation that you spend a lot more on staff and rent and could sell just as much or almost as much online. The industries that have grown during this period include wellness products, home delivery, video games, remote learning, and video chat. These industries and sectors would likely retain a lot of that growth. There will likely be an increasing number of gig economy and warehouse workers. Companies may be more willing to allow working from home as they become more accustomed to long-term remote work. But that's just kind of the surface level what a average worker would experience. It's not kind of going deeper to the system. The government bailout for the coronavirus has accelerated some of the most aggressively privatized, speculative, and risky capitalistic elements of the U.S. economy. More and more duties that are typically allocated to the state will continue to be outsourced to private capitalists in the American tradition. And more of those private capitalists will be operating with increasingly predatory and risky investments. This means that companies will continue to amass more and more capital in an increasingly fewer amount of places. And then, just to get even more speculative, this is kind of getting into the fantasy land part, but I've seen people talking about both a civil war or the Balkanization of the United States. And personally, I don't think this can really happen. Or if it does, it won't happen for a long time. People just like to talk about this. But I do think the makeup of the United States will change over time. And one reason there won't be a civil war or balkanization is the differences amongst Americans isn't completely regional. Some states are more conservatives than others, and cities are more left-wing than suburbs, etc. But it's not like we're divided along north and south lines like in the Civil War. Instead, what I see happening is traditional state borders becoming more malleable and more informed by some type of economic positioning. I think it's more likely we see the U.S. progress towards something like a mixture of like imperial states, duchies, or like techno-duchies, decentralized administrative centers, semi-autonomous city-states, stuff like that. At this point, the existence of nation states are a barrier to some capitalist interests, or at least the biggest and most powerful concentrations of capital are burdened by elements of the nation state. Companies thrive when they're not burdened by any national laws. They want to work beyond laws or outside of them. So the U.S. splitting up into a bunch of little problems the U.S. splitting up into a bunch of little countries isn't going to solve the problems that capitalists have, and unless there's some type of revolution, the U.S. borders are only going to change if it helps capitalism. There's no other incentive for the U.S.'s borders to change. That's why I think we're more likely to get city-states within the U.S. or some other weird manipulation of state boundaries. To use an example, because I'm from Washington State, so I'll use the Northwest as an example. If the U.S. were to balkanize, then presumably Washington, Oregon, and Idaho become its own country. But what I think is more likely is if Western Washington and Western Oregon become a state, and Eastern Washington and Eastern Oregon merge with Idaho and Montana or something like that. I mean, that's still highly speculative, but I think that's more likely. And in the western part, the suburbs around Seattle and Portland would likely be consolidated into city limits, and these would become like semi-autonomous city-states within other states. I mean, I've admitted, like, this is in pure speculative la la land, but I think that is more likely to happen than just like, a second civil war happened. Well, it's like, between who or why? But I hope that my speculative stuff doesn't distract from the more tangible ways we can predict the economy changing.
State of the state.
And that's the state of the state.
State of the state.
Thank you for listening to my podcast. My name is Christian.